Minister Richard Marles, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. And joining me on the program now, the Greens leader, Milne, is here on AM Agenda. You're releasing your border protection policy today, lifting the refugee intake to 30,000. But on current numbers, isn't it the reality under the Greens deal, under the Greens plan, that if you don't come by boat, you won't be resettled in Australia as a refugee? Because the 30,000 figure that you're talking about, that'll easily be matched by boat arrivals.
Well, what we're saying is that we need to increase the humanitarian intake overall to 30,000, and 10,000 of those should be taken as a sort of emergency backlog take from Indonesia, Malaysia, from the region generally. So it's people who have left Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and are wherever they are in the system, and UNHCR classifying them as refugees, and then we would provide safe placement. So it's about 3,800 coming out of Indonesia and Malaysia particularly. That's to take the pressure off, to give people options other than the boats. But 30,000 is a significant increase. It's affordable, and it is absolutely the right thing to do for refugees.
But the vast majority would be boat arrivals, wouldn't they, under your plan, because the boat arrivals would well and truly continue?
Well, we're also saying that we would lift the ban on visas from countries where at the moment you can't get a visa of any kind to come to Australia, and so you have no option but to be forced on boats. And that's what a lot of people don't realise. There are people with documentation who could come to Australia if they could get a visa of some kind and ask for asylum when they got here, but they're refused because they're coming from Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka.
But given the tens of millions of refugees, though, and certainly with the Syrian civil war unfolding, wouldn't we see an absolute influx of asylum seekers under that plan? Would that be manageable?
Well, there are 160,000 in one refugee camp alone on the Jordanian side as a result of the Syrian conflict. So this is a global problem. The Europeans are, of course, taking more as a result of the refugee crisis across Syria and across generally in the region. What we're saying is Australia was involved in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. As a result of those wars, you've got increased flows of refugees. At the end of the Sri Lankan civil war, the same. We have to take a regional approach and a global approach. The best way of doing that is say, let's lift our own humanitarian intake.
What happens if more arrive, though? What do you do with the surplus numbers? If you've got 30,000, what happens to the 5, 10, 15,000 more? What
has always happened, Kieran, is that if we take a reasonable amount, then we can start talking to other countries like the Canadians, for example, and ask them, given that Australia has increased its humanitarian intake, will they also increase theirs in the light of the numbers? That's the issue. Malcolm Fraser did that with the Vietnam solution at the time. He basically increased the intake in Australia, set up more reasonable regional processing, and then other countries took some as well.
When you're looking at, when we see these heartbreaking images of babies' coffins and so on going on the planes, you call it a race to the bottom, but isn't it also, aren't many of these decisions being driven by people wanting a circuit breaker to stop people putting their lives at risk on these journeys?
I've no doubt that's why a lot of people thought the efforts in the Parliament last year were worth considering, but we said at the time it wouldn't work. Deterrence doesn't work, and as a result we've seen 4 times the number get on boats and more drownings than ever before. So I think people are now accepting that didn't work. Deterrence doesn't work. I think people who want to see refugees looked after don't want to see them dumped on Manus Island, don't want to see them dumped in Nauru. That's why we're saying we should help a regional process, put some money into Indonesia, help get people assessed quickly, take more ourselves, and then talk to the region and globally about taking more.
And you're announcing a bit later this morning.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, we'll have coverage of that as well. Senator Milne, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That's all we've got time for on AM Agenda. We're going to take you live to Tony Abbott and Kevin Rudd speaking at the Business Chamber in Sydney over the next half hour, so stay with